At the Okoli Law Group, we specialize in producing justice. If you or a loved one in the Atlanta metro area is facing serious criminal charges, then you need serious legal representation.
The Okoli Law Group is here for you. The Okoli Law Group is here for us.
The Okoli Law Group, serious legal representation.
Peace, family. I hope all is well. I hope you guys are having or have had a great Monday. No, today's Tuesday. Today is Tuesday. I hope all is well. Thank you so much for joining. And being part of this important and awesome conversation. Ebube should be joining us here shortly. Today's topic, we're going to speak on the whole Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, them leaving ECOWAS. And what's next, how that's going to affect ECOWAS. And Tinubu, President Tinubu of Nigeria, who I think is over ECOWAS as a whole, he said the countries haven't officially, whatever the process is to officially leave ECOWAS, they haven't done that yet. So I'm not sure where they're at officially. Wilfred, you know what, Wilfred, we'll go ahead and get started. Let me put the link in the chat room. Ebube should be coming on here shortly. I'll put the link in the chat room. But, well, just hold on for a second. Let Ebube come on first. But we got a couple of announcements. Number one, we are rolling to Senegal. We are rolling to Senegal for the Jazz Festival here in May 12th through the 22nd. We are rolling to Senegal. Please visit. Okay, here we go. They requested to leave, but ECOWAS is not granting it. So that's interesting. So we're rolling to Senegal May 12th to the 22nd. Please visit Danfo, DANFO.Africa. Please visit Danfo, DANFO.Africa to learn more. We would love to have you come and join us. If you are interested, go to Danfo.Africa, send me a message, and I will holler back. Include your phone number when you message me. So Ebube has joined us. I'm going to bring Ebube on. Ebube.
Dynasty man, what's going on, brother?
What's going on, bro? How you doing, man?
Doing well. You know, things have been busy.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, busy is always good. But I'm happy with how everything's going on my end. What about you? How's everything going on your end?
All is well. Just got back from Nigeria a couple weeks ago. Got my passport renewed. I love my Nigeria. Got it renewed. So yeah, so I'm cooking.
And it's an ECOWAS passport, right?
It's an ECOWAS passport. So now the question is, listen, when I go to Mali, Niger, or Burkina Faso, am I good to go?
How appropriate,
Yeah, am I good to go?
Also, too, I like the frames. They're a nice look,
I appreciate it. I got to give my eyes a break with the contacts, so I wear my glasses as much as possible now.
Oh, those are prescription?
Yeah, these are prescription, yeah.
I thought you were just being fashionable.
No. These are prescription.
Nice.
Yeah, these are prescription. So, Ebube, go ahead and introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are. Let's jump into it.
Let's do it. My name is Attorney Ebube Okoli. I'm a Nigerian-born, American-trained lawyer, geopolitical analyst. I'm also the host of Up Close and Center. That's a channel here on YouTube. We periodically release content. It's been very busy, so I haven't been able to release as much as I want, but I do have several documentaries ready to go. I just need to finish the editing, and those will be pretty impactful when they release. So for those of you who haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to Up Close and Center. And if you're watching this here and you haven't hit that like button, go ahead and hit that like button. Go ahead and hit that share button. And if you haven't subscribed, which I don't know why you wouldn't subscribe to a phenomenal channel like this, go ahead and hit that subscription button.
Sorry about that. That was on me. Sorry about that. I had to. I was disconnecting my VPN because I know sometimes with the VPN is on, I keep forgetting that the signal doesn't come in clear, so I had to disconnect it. But we're good to go.
Sounds good.
You might have to introduce yourself one more time though, because I think it We had a connection issue, so I'm so sorry, Ebube. One more time.
No problem. Let me go ahead and reintroduce myself. My name is Attorney Ebube Okoli. For those who don't know me, hopefully those of you that do know me, you know what I stand for. I stand for quality. I stand for information, and I stand for quality analysis. And if that's what you're looking for, you're definitely going to get that. So, Dennis, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab the screen.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and get that going. I'll let you know when I'm ready.
Got it right here.
All right. Let me go ahead and get it. I forgot how to present. Give me a second.
Guys, can everyone read the screen? Or I might do it in present mode. It's up to where it takes up the whole screen. It's up to can you guys see the screen, or would you want me to blow it up even more? People in the chat room. People in the chat room, do you want me to blow the screen up more, or is it
I would say blow it up as much as you can.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, perfect. All right, go ahead.
All right. So now we're going to talk about the Sahel. Now it should be completely filling the screen. I don't know why it's not. Let me figure that one out really quickly. One second, Dennis.
Guys, do me a favor, hit the like button again. Please hit the like button. Also, we'll put the link in the chat room when Ebube gets done, and we'll take some callers. I know Wilford, I know Wilford, you're in the you're waiting in the back room. So when Ebube gets on, when Ebube gets done, I'll bring you on to ask your question. But you know what? I think they'll still make it. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, where at the very least, if you have an ECOWAS passport in quotation marks, you'll still be able to enter the countries visa free. But that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting with how they do it.
But go ahead, because I still don't understand like the benefits outside of travel within these countries visa free. Like, what are the benefits of ECOWAS?
Well, really, what it's supposed to be, it's for business. It's mostly business, meaning that if we need to move goods between nations, there's not additional. They don't make it difficult to transact business between nations.
Okay.
Yeah, so Dennis, go ahead and let me get back to sharing my screen here.
Okay.
1 second.
But even if it's not in full screen mode on your end, we should be good to go.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I'll just make it full screen on mine.
Cool.
Oh, here we go. All right, bam.
All right. So yeah, if you can just make it full screen.
Yeah, it's full screen on my end. We should be good to go.
All right. So now we're going to cover the Sahel, which is an interesting area in West Africa. There's a lot that goes on here. It's a land of great significance. And we have to remember that everywhere in Africa has history, prehistory, ancient history, classical history, Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, high Middle Ages, modern history, postmodern history, contemporary. Sometimes when we think about Africa, we oversimplify things and we look at Africa as if Africa just simply wasn't around during all these periods and merely popped up after colonialism.
Right.
So geographically, here's the area of the Sahel. It's a very important area because it's a connection point between North Africa and Central Africa. It's an area that straddles the Sahel. Hey, Dinosaur, the slide's moving.
No, the slide didn't move. You're still on the first one that says the Sahel, so it didn't move to the map.
Okay, let me stop. I don't know why it's doing this. Let me stop for a second. Well, I'm just going to proceed without it. How about that?
Okay.
All right. There we go. So it's
you know what? Still put the PowerPoint. Let me share it, and then people could at least use it as a guide. I mean, what do you think?
For sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely send it out to you. But we can just kick off.
Okay.
I think I can be pretty descriptive in what I'm describing. So the Sahel is an area that straddles. It starts from Eritrea and ends in Senegal. It's a thin strip, but it encompasses many countries. You had a lot of ancient civilizations in this part of the world. You had Tichit, which was a very ancient civilization which predates Rome. And as I was alluding to earlier, a lot of people forget that Africa has a very deep, complex history that we only scratch the surface of. We don't truly get to what really Africa is when we just look at it after colonialism and after the defeats that Africans suffered at the hands of imperialists. Now, out of the Sahel, we had three major empires that came out. We had Ghana, Mali, Songhai.
Mm-hmm.
Ghana was the first, of course. It was a very sophisticated empire, gold, everything. One of the problems that Ghana had is that Ghana, they'd gotten to a certain point of civilization and they didn't, and this is ancient Ghana, of course, they were far, and if you remember Africa during that time, the most turbulent area was North Africa, along the coast, along the Mediterranean coast. North Africa was a very tumultuous place. So many of the Africans in West Africa initially started out in North Africa and moved down, far enough away from North Africa where they could set up. Because you have to remember the mentality of the people that lived in the Arabian Peninsula that came into Africa in the 7th century AD and prior to that, of course, but in large numbers during that time. They came in and they came from a desert. So in the desert, there was scarcity. And they were coming into Africa. And at that time, North Africa was very green and lush, and everything you needed was available. So the Africans didn't need to develop a do or die culture over dried dates or grapes or olives or anything of that nature. But the people coming from this desert region, to them, they were ready to go all out over these things. So many of the Africans knew that Africa was a large piece of land, so they moved further into Africa, away from North Africa. And one of those, and many of those great civilizations happened to emerge in West Africa. So you had Ghana, of course. However, Ghana's problem is that they militarily didn't prepare themselves for the realities that they knew could potentially come. And so the Almoravids, or the Moroccans, eventually led by Abu Bakr, eventually invaded, and they were able to take over, and that's how it fell, basically. That's how ancient Ghana fell. But ancient Ghana was able to recover and pick back up, but it came in a different form. And you have to remember that Ghana, Mali, Songhai, to an extent, all of these overlapped in various areas, and many of them are related, but they are different. So after Ghana fell in 1240, you had the Mali Empire basically take its place. Now, Mali was had better administration than ancient Ghana. And Mali, to an extent, had a better military. They were able to stave off many of the people that came from the outside who wanted to disrupt their civilization. Now, of course, you had Sundiata Keita, who was the real Lion King. You had universities in Mali. Some of the first universities in Africa, in the world, in fact, are in Africa. Hey, Dennis, you're going to say something?
I said, Timbuktu.
Exactly. So you had universities. Some of the books from that time, from that university in ancient Mali, are still around. In fact, hundreds of these collections, these manuscripts, are still around. Of course, the lingua franca at that time was Arabic, and other indigenous African languages were used. Of course, this is where Mansa Musa gets a lot of his fame during the Mali Empire. Much of the architecture that they created is still around, but the problem with Mali, and this is a problem that happens once people get, quote unquote, too civilized, you basically start to invent your own problems. Mali had an interesting setup where it was more so like almost a loose confederation, meaning that they didn't enforce strict compliance. It was more so people joined Mali because it made more sense to be a part of this empire than to not be a part of it. So Mali was multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious. And anytime you have that, those different groups can easily become factions. And once they become factions and they forget that the overall umbrella that they all fall under is what unites them, they start focusing on what divides them. And eventually their empire went in decline. And that's when Songhai in about 1375 came into the picture. Now, Songhai essentially set the parameters for what we would consider the outer limits of West Africa. Songhai had better administration than Mali, a better military than Mali, but at the same time, its military wasn't superb. It focused on other things. It focused on trade. The empire focused on making money. It was a very profitable, a very rich place. And you had leaders like Askia Muhammad, Sani Ali Burr. These were great men. However, they had the same problem. And this is a problem that Africans have, is that we don't study African history enough to learn. And if some people that do study Africa, especially within our community, they look at the glorious times and the highlights and all of the greatness that comes from such a rich and long storied culture and history. But then they don't look at, okay, well, how did we get to where we are currently in the world? Right. You have to look at the fall off, and you have to analyze the fall off. And oftentimes the fall off is where you get the greatest lesson. So when you watch a movie like Scarface or any of these movies, or where the person makes that one mistake, you say, man, he was on top until he made that one mistake. Or, and at that point they start to fall off. And it's those points in African history that we really need to start analyzing and learning more from, because those are just as important as the highlights, if not more important. So some of the things we can glean from ancient Ghana was their lack of military might. They had riches. They were a very civilized group. However, they were surrounded to the north by barbarism, by barbarians. And if you're surrounded by barbarians, in order to defeat the barbarians, you have to imbibe a little bit of that spirit and be able to go to lengths that they're willing to go in order to maintain your freedom and independence. So with Songhai, the last of the medieval, if you will, high point West African empires, you had Ahmad al-Mansur, a Moroccan who saw that there was a lot of infighting in Songhai, and he decided to invade and plunder and take what he could get. Now, that was just a brief oversimplification of West African history in the Sahel. However, there's a lot of lessons to learn there. Of course, the invasions by the Moroccans into West Africa, the first time during Ghana and the second time during Songhai, they weren't the complete reasons why those African empires fell. Those African empires fell because they were eating themselves from inside. They were allowing internal decay and fighting and wrangling to divide them. Once they got powerful, the problem with those African empires is once they achieved a certain level of power, they started fighting amongst themselves over things that didn't really mean anything. Part of the problem is that in some of the systems, there were matrilineal, meaning that the ruler per se, there was almost a competition to see who would be the ruler. Now that can be good, but then that can also be bad, because anytime there's competition, there are winners and then there are losers. And the system they create didn't adequately address when and how the losers who didn't attain power or attain the title or attain the role of king or emperor, what would happen to them? How were they compensated for, to make sure that they don't form factions and try to take down the government of the day? So 1594, the Moroccans came and invaded Songhai, and it was almost a straw that broke the camel's back. Now, one thing we can think about is the fact that the longest running empire in Africa, in the Sahel actually, was Bornu Kingdom. It lasted from the 9th century till the 1900s. And one of the things about Bornu Kingdom is that they domesticated the horse, and they also controlled supply lines. They controlled salt, they controlled some gold, and they controlled other commodities within West Africa. So they were a very wealthy African empire. However, it was compulsory for men of a certain age to learn how to ride a horse, and it was compulsory for a certain percentage of the population to be able to fire a gun. Mm-hmm. They were one of the first African empires who were heavily armed. So you have to get the picture of, you'd have these Africans on horses. They would have tough armor, but it would be flexible on themselves and on their horses, and then they would have rifles. And they also learned how to ride horses and shoot guns. And it's no surprise that their empire lasted the longest out of any other empire. So that's something that Africans can pick up and learn from, is that the benefits of having a strong military.
Let me read this super chat. Shout out to O'Shea Duke Jackson over at Kinganda. Thank you for the Kigandan shillings. Hotep, brother. I appreciate you. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Ebube.
All right. Hotep. So the thing is, with West Africa, in the Sahel in particular, with those kingdoms, we see that these kingdoms were always wealthy. They always had gold. We've heard stories since we were children about the gold in Mansa Musa and everything that he controlled. We heard about his Hajj to Mecca. We learned about the salt. And at that time, the reason salt was valuable is because there wasn't any refrigeration. And when there's no refrigeration, you have to preserve things with salt. So salt was worth its weight in gold, because if you wanted to travel far distances, you needed protein in order to prevent things like, I think, scurvy and other problems like that. I'm not sure if scurvy is a lack of protein or protein deficiency in the diet, but those various ailments that come with needing to travel long distances and preserve food, like on a ship. So salt wasn't just something people casually enjoyed with their meal. It was a necessity in the game of world powers. Salt was literally worth its weight in gold. And so not only did those brothers realize what they had, but the Bornu Kingdom Empire made sure that their militaries were on point to the point that if you wanted to invade, so many citizens were, almost every male citizen of the empire was in the active reserve, for lack of a better term, which means when you invade, if you tried to invade, you would literally have to fight the entire male population. All right, so now we get to the point of colonialism and unfair trade deals. So we're moving into that. So those empires, eventually they all went down, but they were very key empires. And at the time, they were internationally sound and internationally respected nations. And we have to remember that sometimes we think about Africa in its present form, and that's a shattered Africa. That's not a true representation of what Africa really is. It's more so a shattered Africa. At that time, when Songhai held sway, you couldn't just disrupt the trade lines. You would be dealt with severely. So you had to respect the system and the structure that those brothers set up, and you had to work with them. You couldn't just come in and dominate and give them an unfair trade deal. Fast forward till today, you look at those nations today. It's not that those nations are poor. Those nations are just being overly exploited. And the three nations that we're going to focus on are Niger Republic, Burkina Faso, and Mali. All former French colonies, but they were, in their heyday, a lot greater of nations than they are today. Now, French exploitation of Africa is a well-covered topic. Even former President René Chirac, former president of France, stated that they bled Africa for 4.5 centuries. France looted their raw materials, and then France told lies that the Africans are good for nothing. Huh?
No, I was laughing like, wow.
Well, I mean, this is a direct quote from
Yeah.
the former French president. He said that in the name of religion, we destroyed their culture, and after being made rich at their expense, we now steal their brains through miseducation and propaganda to prevent them from enacting black retribution against us, which is a pretty heavy statement coming from a former French president, which of course France is a former colonial interest. I would call them a colonial power. I would say that they were pulling the strings for a lot of nations. And of course, till today, you have the CFA franc. And part of the issues that Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and of course, other West African and Central African nations are having with this monetary union that some have alleged have crippled the nation.
I was gonna ask. So you just brought up the CFA. So there's Burkina Faso, Mali, and Nigeria. Did they create their own currency? Or they? But currently they're still using the CFA. And I know not too long ago, some years back, Mali actually broke away from the CFA and had their own currency, but it didn't last, and they ended up going back to the CFA.
And that's one of the things people are waiting to see is that, okay, these coups. Now, what are these coups truly for? Are these coups merely so that a small group or a small clique can take power and lord it over everybody else? Or are we looking at a true revolution where these groups are saying enough of the French exploitation, enough of only receiving 5%, and while France takes 95%, and then we have all these poor people, and then when they flood Europe to take advantage of the wealth that was misplaced from their country into another country, they're basically locked out at the border and told to go back to where they come from.
Right.
So there's a lot of dynamics here in regards to the currency. That's expected to be a natural result for them to move away from that. However, the real thing that they have to solidify is, remember, you have to militarily be strong before you make. Okay. Diplomacy only comes after military power. Military power comes first, then diplomacy comes second. So if you're looking and focusing more so on the diplomacy, you're making a mistake. You have to get military power all the way up, and then you come to the table with a position of strength, and then you make demands, and you say, here's what we're going to do. Not, can we do this? Are you okay with us doing this? It's, here's what we're going to do. So France still controls a lot of West Africa and Central Africa. But it appears that a lot of nations seem to be breaking that grip that France has on those nations. And we have to realize that France without those colonial ties is would be at the level of
a third world country.
I would say Greece. It would still be a European nation. It would still have places people want to go and visit. It would be similar to Greece. Greece isn't a world power at this stage in history. It's not a bad place to visit. It's not a bad place to vacation. But Greece isn't really calling the shots.
Right.
Greece can't call the United States and tell them what to do. They can't call the United Kingdom and tell them what to do. They can't call China or Russia and tell them what to do. But that's not their lane. They understand that tourism, that's their lane. That's what they're going to do.
Right.
France would be a similar nation without the resources that it gets from Africa. It would be a nation similar to Greece. One problem with that, though, is that France, of course, is a historical ally of the United States for at least almost the last 100 years. Of course, prior to that, United States and France did have problems. They did fight each other.
Right.
But they're smart. They believe in, at the end of the day, there's a certain power structure that they want to maintain. So even though they're different groups and different people, they understand that their overall objective requires their group however they define it, to act in a certain way through thought, speech, and action to achieve the goals that they seek to get. So all their small differences, that's the beautiful thing about Europeans, is the Europeans will bash each other over the head for 200 years like the British and the French, but then they'll sit down at a conference in Berlin and they'll
work it out.
And they'll work it all out.
Right.
You know, they put that aside and say, hey, at the end of the day, we're European. And I personally believe that that's one of the reasons that the European is so successful, because his innate ability to prioritize power of the collective over power of the individual. Because, of course, Europe has tribes. Polish are tribes, Russian are a tribe, the Angles, the Welsh, the Irish, the Scots. All these people these are the tribes of Europe, but they can put aside their tribalism and act as Europeans and truly act as Europeans to attain power. So France, being of that same, cut from that same cloth, they're allies with the United States. So they're in a position where the United States by default doesn't want one of their allies to be reduced to the rank of a third world nation at a time when France is critical in caging Russia from making further incursions into Europe to regain what Russia believes is rightfully theirs. So we talked about the coups, and the coups, some are characterizing them as rebellions: Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger Republic. Now, coups were the most active in Africa between the 80s, between the mid 70s to the late 80s. That's when coups were most active in Africa. However, since 2020, there have been, the entire Sahel has witnessed coups. You had a coup in Sudan, Chad, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, further south even in Gabon. Now, some of the countries with the most coups, of course, you had Sudan with 17, Niger with 8, Burkina Faso with 10, Sierra Leone with 10, Ghana with 10, Burundi with 11, Nigeria with 8, Mali with 8. In regards to Mali, it's interesting because it looks as if Mali isn't getting half as much blowback as some of the other nations.
Right.
Now, a lot is happening in Mali, and maybe there are things happening behind the scenes that we don't know, because power doesn't always make declarations. Power just moves. And that's the beautiful thing about power. The most powerful person in the room doesn't need to yell and scream.
Right.
If you got 5 people in the room and 2 people are holding, one person is holding the other 4 people hostage, and he has sophisticated weaponry and the other people just have their hands, the person with the sophisticated weaponry doesn't really have to even raise his voice.
Right.
All he has to do is just give somebody a look to let them know that he's displeasing them, and that person will fix up and act sharp. So just because there's not a lot of noise coming out of Mali at the present doesn't mean that there's not subterfuge or something else going on in the background, because you have to remember that the Sahel is very important to France. France needs it for its current survival and its current state in the world. You take away Africa from France, France, of course, isn't going to be the France that we all know.
Right.
Now, we have to remember that, and this is why I like to learn African history, and a really good teacher of African history is John Heinrich Clarke. Now, with one of the things that he talked about going from the fire, or the frying pan to the fire.
Right.
There was a time when Africans, and I talked about this earlier, inhabited the whole continent from North to South Africa. We're all indigenous Africans before any of the foreign invaders came in and decided to settle there permanently, like what we see in North Africa with people from the Arabian Peninsula now occupying parts of North Africa for hundreds of years. Prior to that period, you had the Romans who came into Africa. So the Romans were in large parts of North Africa, and the Romans were mistreating those Africans, treating them terribly. A lot of the fighters in the Colosseum, a lot of the gladiators were African
Right.
during the time of Roman. So really, if they made Gladiator and they made it historically accurate, 9 times out of 10, the gladiators were African people who refused to live by the Roman way of life. And Rome had a very debased way of doing things. That didn't jive well with the African spirit. There were a lot of things, if you really understand Roman history, there's certain things that you just look at and say, my goodness. But so some of those, and we're seeing some of those things have a resurgence today, and some people are talking about the moral decay of today's society. But that's nothing compared to what was going on in ancient Rome.
Yeah. Pause. Yeah, we don't. Yeah,
precisely.
we don't need the details. But Ebube, it's getting there here in America though.
Hey, well, the thing is, that's why you got to study history, because there's nothing new under the sun. Mm-hmm. Everything comes back. It came from somewhere. It comes from somewhere. Right. Nothing is new. Now, in regards to North Africa, you had Romans, and they were mistreating the Africans. And then you had the Arabs come in the 7th century saying, you know what, we'll help you get the Romans off your back. But then you got to be with us. You got to take our religion. You got to have our people convert your people. And you have to basically take on our way of life. And we'll help get these people off your back. And they did that. And if you read the history of the Arab in Africa, you'd realize that those Africans were better off with the Romans. So this is why Africans need to make sure that they know history. So now if we take a look at what's happening currently, we see that the French could theoretically be made to be the Romans. And the way Russia is making incursions into those spaces, the reason that they're doing that is because they understand that France needs Africa, right, more than Africa needs France. And Russia believes that if they can cut off France's connection to Africa, then they win, because France will essentially have to pack it up. And that will affect the West, which means that the 3 strong nations in Europe, militarily and economically, are Germany, France, and the UK. The UK is pulled away from Europe, thus leaving Germany and France. France is in total support of the Ukraine, whether financially or militarily, and they're helping fuel what's going on there. So Russia is thinking, well, if I can go behind your line of scrimmage and do some things back there, maybe that's going to even up the playing field. So it's moving in. Russia is moving into a lot of spaces in West Africa in order to keep the French from coming back. But the question is this like North Africa, when the Africans were able to get the Romans off their back with the assistance of the Arabs, who then turned around to be worse than the Romans could have ever been.
One second, let me read this super chat real quick. Tarhaka, sure. Thank you for the $5 holla. I appreciate you, brother. Guys, hit the like button again. Please hit that like button. All right, go ahead, Ebube.
If you haven't hit the like button, please go ahead and take some time, hit the like button. Also hit the share button. If you want a super chat, now is the time. Go ahead and throw that in there, and we will proceed from there. All right, so another thing about Burkina Faso, too, is that they're nationalizing. Now, nationalizing is a fancy word of saying that I'm going to be the one who economically controls the minerals in my country.
Right.
Which shouldn't really be an extreme statement. But when you've allowed yourself to be exploited for so long,
right, that
becomes the culture that's expected of you.
How do you think that's going to play out, them nationalizing their
well, like I said, at the end of the day, France looks at the minerals in these countries as its own. So now if they're saying, no, you can't have these, that means there's going to be a problem. Now, how France reacts to that problem is going to be what happens. France may try to maybe sponsor a faction that will come back in power and restore the existing deals. That would probably be the quickest way to do it.
Right.
Simply change the head out on the body and keep it pushing. A full-scale war, I don't know if that's what we're going to see at this particular point in time, unless it's between two African nations. I don't see France personally getting.
Yeah, there'll be proxies.
I would see a proxy, but who knows? These things are being, of course, there's a plan because France believes that these resources are theirs. So if they believe that these resources are theirs, of course, they're going to do something because you're taking something from them in their perception. And I always tell people this. I was speaking with a young lady, a friend of mine, and of course, I'm very pragmatic. And she was telling me that war is the worst thing ever, and we should never have wars. And very idealistic. And I told her, no, war is necessary. War is necessary because people, groups, nations have different ideologies, and these ideologies are not congruent. So, for example, this young lady was East African, and I told her that there were people who came to colonize your country because they had the belief that you were under them and you needed to be ruled by them.
Right.
And your people believe that that's not necessarily the case, so there was a war. War is necessary where you have competing ideologies that both can't be present at the same time in the same place. Therefore, there's going to be war. Now, war doesn't mean that people pick up weapons and directly aim it at each other. War is deception. War, anytime someone deceives you, they've declared war on you. War is sabotage. War is economic. War is political. There's so many different variants of war. We shouldn't just simplify it to just they send troops into your country. No, if I blockade your nation so that goods can't come in or out, that's war. I'm essentially suffocating your nation. I'm strangling your nation without sending any troops actually into your nation. If I put sanctions on your nation, that's war. So in Burkina Faso, they're moving very quickly. They're looking to have resource control. They're looking to nationalize their resources. And recently, a few hundred Russian soldiers landed in Burkina Faso. So, Burkina Faso has.
Is it Russian soldiers or is it the Wagner group?
Well, it's actual Russian troops. It's not Wagner, which is different. Wagner, of course, for those who don't know, Wagner is a private organization, not directly linked to the Kremlin, to Moscow. Wink, wink.
Right.
But at the same time, they are almost like a tool of Russian foreign diplomacy, not diplomacy.
Well, they're contractors, like
they're a tool.
Kind of like what was the U.S. using in Iraq?
Was it Blackwater?
Blackwater.
Yeah, so they're one of those type of organizations where they're not the Russian government, but we'll just leave it at that. Now we also have Niger, where we had a pro-Western president that was recently taken out. He had strong ties to the West, strong ties to France, strong ties to the United States. Some criticized it.
What happened to him? Is he exiled or is he still locked up?
No, he's locked up, and they basically said if anybody invades,
they're going to kill him.
And he's they're going to put a date at the end of his dash. Born on dash, and that will be the day. So I think they released his son and they released his wife. I believe they were holding the whole family, and the threat was that the entire family would take a family vacation if invaded, and I think that actually held off nations from invading. But it makes sense for the Niger, I'll call it a government at this point, the military government. It makes sense for them to not release him because he's a bargaining chip. They can always say, hey, we'll harm this person if you violate any of our national borders.
Right.
And if you're invading in order to restore this person to power, it's not going to work that way. It's not going to work the way you think. Another thing is that the military in Niger is actually pretty popular. These guys walk around like celebrities. So
now Nigeria was the where the former president used to go fight with the military and he got killed, right?
Chad.
Oh, that was Chad. Okay, that was Chad. Okay.
But they were fighting the same enemies, and they were fighting. And at the end of the day, a lot of those places, the borders are very porous.
Right.
So the Chadian army might actually enter Cameroon or Niger and keep fighting, and then days later they realize they've crossed the international border and they'll go back.
Right.
So I remember there were reports about Chad's army fighting Boko Haram into Nigeria, and certain people were complaining. But it's like, I mean, hey, if they followed these terrorists, they shouldn't stop following them, in my opinion.
Right.
But of course, there's international protocol and there's national sovereignty. Now, one of the things is that the Niger military government is getting a lot of legitimacy. Nations,
but Niger is also where, under Trump, where those U.S. soldiers were killed by the insurgents.
Niger, you said?
That was Niger, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have volatile areas, and you have to remember that some of these areas are ungoverned. You just have roaming bandits, if you will, that roam these areas and they harm people. They do harm people. But all in all, the Nigerian government is actually getting a lot of legitimacy. They're slowly looking to transition into a civilian government.
Mm-hmm.
And once they do that, they're basically that's them letting you know that they're here to stay, that they're not going anywhere. They're here to stay. We've had elections. The military has stepped down, allegedly, and the civilians are in control now. So don't come bother us about civilian rule. The civilians are here. And the more elections that they have and the further they get away from the military, the more legitimacy that they gain.
Right.
So ECOWAS right now essentially is just the coastal nations. You still have Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Sierra Leone.
Is Chad part of ECOWAS?
Well, Chad isn't. Chad is one of those kind of. It's like how people say it's Texas the South, right? It is, but it isn't. It's Florida the South. It is, but it isn't. It's Virginia the South. It is, but it isn't. Chad and Cameroon are connected to West Africa permanently.
I've always wondered why Cameroon's not part of ECOWAS. That's
it just isn't. It's a Central African nation. But in my opinion, the cultural ties are there to justify being the West African nation. Right. Same with Chad to an extent. I look at Chad as being an extension of Niger and northeastern Nigeria.
Right.
Than I do it being related to Sudan, or I believe it's right under Libya. But they're grouped into Central Africa, and geographically, I guess that makes sense. So one of the things we have to remember is that in 2023, Nigeria, I believe, made up 56% of the ECOWAS GDP. And Nigeria is actually underperforming. Nigeria it's about 30%. The economy has lost about 30% of its steam that it had 11 years ago. Nigeria was almost at 600 billion for GDP. Now Nigeria is at about 390. So Nigeria has actually grown backwards, but it still makes up almost 60% of the GDP for the entire West Africa. Mm-hmm. But in all actuality, if Nigeria was better managed, Nigeria is a company and you have to, all these nations are basically corporations. They were set up to be corporations to fulfill a certain end, and the people inside of those corporately designated nations were given names, which is interesting. But Nigeria, you have to look at it like a business more so than a traditional country. The business, the corporation Nigeria Limited, Incorporated, how is it being ran? If you were an investor, would you put your money there? Do you believe that you would get a return? And this is where leadership comes into it, but really this is also where followership comes into it, because I believe you allow the leaders that you have. If your leaders are bad, it's your fault, because you can always get rid of them. There's more of you than there are them. Go get rid of them.
So
get rid of them.
How do you think this is going to play out?
When you say this, can you define that pronoun?
Okay, how do you feel so with Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso leaving ECOWAS? How does this affect the future of ECOWAS?
Well, here's the thing: if they truly left as an anti-colonial gesture, right? Now, once again, you have to ascertain the reason as to why they're leaving. Is it an anti-colonial gesture? Are they saying we're fighting the French system? If they're doing that, then some have characterized the French system as purely exploitative. And if you look at the numbers, they're getting 5%. France is getting 95% in some of the deals and transactions. Well, then it's a good thing because these nations have high growing populations. I think Niger, for example, the average woman is having 7 children. And in some places in Europe, it's 1.5. So if the resources are being maldistributed to the minority and the majority is being stripped, then of course that's a bad thing. Now, if these people are coming to power, and we have to realize that not every coup is a righteous coup. I define a righteous coup as a coup that's set in place purely for the nation, purely for the people, and not for any one person or any group. That's a righteous coup. Those coups often lead to stability. So, for example, the French Revolution, where they threw off the monarchy, of course, afterwards they had some tough times, but eventually they got it right. Now, if these African nations are throwing off Western imperialism and Western influence in order to truly build something African in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, in the same way that the Europeans had the spirit of Pan-Europeanism, which drove them to get on code to be able to subjugate the African, if these Africans are saying, and just to define Pan-Africanism, some people, they misunderstand what it actually is. It's just understanding that people who look like you are on your team. And you need to make sure that those people who look like you win, or you need to try your best. Pan-Africanism is the jersey number. Your ethnicity is your last name and number. Now, a team that's playing for its last name and number, meaning that your players are going out there, they don't care if the team wins, if the team loses, they're just trying to make sure that they get a double-double or a triple-double. And they're losing every game, but they're saying, hey, I'm averaging 30 points this season. I'm a great player. Well, your team is sorry. It doesn't really matter how great you're doing if your team is consistently getting swept first round of the playoffs.
Right.
You're not playing as a team. You're putting your name, your last name, above the team name. You're not playing for, the Sixers or the Lakers. You're playing for your individual stats. So when you retire, you didn't get any rings. You didn't win anything of substance, but hey, you're the number 7th scorer in the entire history of the NBA, but it's like, congratulations, you weren't great.
Right.
So Pan-Africanism is understanding that we all wear the same jersey, but yes, we do have different names and numbers. However, when we get on the court, we just have to play as a team regardless of how you feel about that person. Dynas, I know you played team sports. I've played team sports.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you might not like the quarterback. Sometimes you might not like the middle linebacker. We all have to work together to achieve what you need to achieve, because at the end of the day, if he doesn't do well, you don't do well, because you guys are going to lose. Who cares if you had 7 sacks that game? You guys got blown out 74-0. So Pan-Africanism is just an understanding that at the end of the day, we have a certain responsibility to the team.
Right.
And through thought, speech, and action, we need to make that happen. And so if these revolutions are actually in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, where they're saying, you know what, we're fighting this thing for Africans to be able to get back to the days where we were internationally competitive, back to the days where you couldn't just give Africans a bad trade deal, well, then that's one thing. But if it's like the many coups that we've seen in the past, where it becomes like one of my favorite books, Animal Farm. Not sure if you've ever read that.
I'm trying to remember if that was like required reading when I was in high school.
It might have been. I just read it for fun back in the day when I was a kid, because I was fascinated by the concept of communism. I was just fascinated who would come up with such a system and if it could actually work. And that led me to that book, Animal Farm. But in Animal Farm, what happened is there was a wicked farmer. The wicked farmer was overthrown by the animals. And the animals said, everybody's equal here. We're going to instill a system where all the animals are equal. But then eventually the pigs started being more equal.
Mm-hmm.
They started rising to the top and becoming the new farmers. And then when the other animals didn't like the fact that the pigs were mistreating them, the pigs enlisted the dogs to basically be their attack dogs. And they would attack anybody who said anything bad against the pigs. So they basically replaced the farmer. So there was a coup only for the pigs to have a worse reign and be worse dictators than the farmer could have ever been. Remember, it's like replacing the Romans with the Arabs. So that's what we have to look at in regards to the end zone. In regards to military intervention by Nigeria, Nigeria has 120,000, around 120,000 soldiers, armed forces. That may seem like a lot, but it's not a lot for a nation of that size. Comparatively, Sudan has 104,000 armed forces. Egypt has almost 500,000. Morocco has 300,000. And South Sudan, with their low population, has about 200,000 soldiers. They don't even have a quarter of the population that Nigeria has, but they have almost double the armed forces. However, that's not important here because there's most likely not going to be an armed invasion. It's believed that the president was acting alone in that when he initially wanted to invade Niger Republic to restore Bazoum. But the thing about Nigeria is this: it seems that the people are against this regime in regards to taking any actions against Niger Republic.
Right.
And of course, the largest ethnic group in Nigeria are the Hausa, if we want to go by the census, the official census. Some dispute the figures, but we'll just go with what we have. The Hausas are the largest group in Nigeria and the largest group in Niger. And the current president of Nigeria is viewed as a southern, quote unquote, southern president, meaning he's not from the north, meaning that anything he does that can be even perceived to be adversarial against the north and the majority ethnic group, they're not gonna allow that to happen.
Right.
So the north, it's believed that the north is the one that prevented the president from having any type of armed invasion into Niger.
Well, they're the same people.
Exactly.
They're the same people.
Exactly. And they weren't going to do it. That could potentially cause the military to say, well, you know what? Rather than fighting our brother, we're just going to take you out of office. We're just going to take you out of office. So it's good. It took a little bit of diplomatic foresight for a good resolution to be reached. I think that there were a lot of knee-jerk reactions that weren't properly thought out. But I'm sure once discussions were had, everybody saw. However, something that Nigeria did that I think is very short-sighted. Nigeria cut the electricity supply to Niger. But if you understand why Nigeria was even supplying electricity to Niger, Nigeria was supplying electricity to Niger because there's a river that flows into Nigeria. And for them not to obstruct the flow, Nigeria gives them electricity. For them not to dam the river on their side, Nigeria dams it at the end. But Nigeria is downstream, which means if Niger Republic says, well, you guys had an agreement to give us electricity if we don't build a dam, what we'll do is we'll build a dam. And so Kanji Dam, the dam in Nigeria, Niger State, I should say, so there's no confusion, one of Nigeria's main power plants is wholly dependent on whether or not Niger Republic wants to build a dam on their side of the river and disrupt the flow to Nigeria.
Right.
So I didn't understand that move particularly, but some have alleged that the administration is looking to get legitimacy. Recently, Bolaji Akinyemi came out and stated that Nigeria is on the wrong side and that Russia is emboldening Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso to weaken Western influence in Africa. And ECOWAS is being turned into a confrontational field between Russia and the United States. So what he was basically alleging, he's a former minister of foreign affairs. So when he speaks, people listen because he has a good grasp on these things. What he was essentially saying is that Africans in West Africa shouldn't allow foreign influence, Russia and America and the Western powers, to use them as proxies to fight a war that they've been fighting since the Cold War. And he further went on to state that Nigeria is actually on the wrong side because they're not standing on the side of Pan-Africanism. The allegation, Senator Shehu Sani stated that Nigeria is turning its back on African brothers because of Western friends. So he stated that Nigeria is trading its African brothers because of Western friends. That statement holds a lot of weight. Another thing that is interesting is that Buhari built a train to Maradi from Nigeria to Niger Republic. A lot of people criticize this train.
I never knew that.
Because the economy of the entire Niger Republic isn't up to the economy of Onitsha. And some people said, well, why not merely connect all of the major cities in Nigeria first before spending billions of dollars to connect something to the Niger Republic? However, if you look at it another way, he was essentially connecting the Niger Republic to the Lagos port in order to further increase import-export revenue from that comes into Nigeria by moving Niger Republic's goods and making them dependent on the Lagos port. Now that the border was closed in the north of Nigeria and south of Niger, Benin lifted the suspension of imported goods to Niger through the port of Cotonou. And the port's director said recently that they're no longer following the directives of foreign nations or Nigeria for that matter.
Oh, wow.
What we also have to remember is that Nigeria and Morocco plan to build a gas pipeline. Nigeria has a lot of gas, more so than oil. As oil slowly loses.
Speaking of gas, that go to a refinery, I think is live now.
Yeah, but they need to move a little bit quicker with deliverables.
Shell is out now. Well, it's supposed to be out.
Well, the effects still haven't been felt yet, is what I'll say. I was excited about it in the beginning, but I think that the rollout of it could have been better. But we're still watching it to see how it plays out.
Louis, you ready to take some callers, or?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
All right, we'll bring Wilfred's been patiently waiting. Wilfred,
Hi.
Are you in France? No, you're in Germany, right?
Yeah, I live in Germany. I'm a French citizen, but I live in Germany.
Yeah, but you're from Cote d'Ivoire, right?
Cameroon.
Cameroon. Okay, Cameroon. All right, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I don't know if Two Niger is in the chat.
Two Niger, he's in the chat. Two Niger's he's in the back of the waiting room. He's here.
Oh, he's here. Well, Uncle, just wanted to tell you that I was right once again. What I said happened, right?
You did say
the three countries.
You did say this was going to happen a couple months ago. You did say that, I think.
Dennis, that's the reason why you always let a dweeb like me in your show. This is because I'm telling the truth, right? As annoying as I am, but hey, well, I'm gonna stop here. But all I wanted to ask to Mr. Okoli is this, because basically, so as I just mentioned, I happen to be a French guy of Cameroonian descent, so I'm English speaking, so I can navigate both the English speaking and Francophone world. I can make the comparison between the kind of informations that I can see in the two worlds. And something that struck me is the fact that, according to me, right, that's my analysis, within the last 15 years, basically, when it comes to Pan-Africanism, there was literally there was a revolution in the French-speaking world that occurred, and that basically made that everyone in West Africa, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean, who is under 40 now, most of the people over there are Pan-African. And that's the reason why the revolutions that are happening in the three countries that we mentioned occurred and were backed by the people. It couldn't have happened before, you know? And that's it is thanks to people like Kemi Seba, for instance, who literally used to make social engineering on the ground to explain to the people all the France-Afrique system and how to fight it, right? That's the reason why we have what we have now. The problem that I have here is the fact that I have the impression, and tell me if I'm wrong, that now in West Africa, these are the Anglophone countries that are behind. Because since the announcement of basically, since the announcement from Mali, Burkina, and Niger that they're leaving ECOWAS, I was curious today. I had to head to Frankfurt to get a new pass and a new idea by the French embassy. So I had time to basically listen to what Nigerian and Ghanaian medias were saying about this stuff. And except few analysts, all of them were basically clones of Ahmed Ebola Tinubu. And I mean, I have the impression that, well, first of all, I have to say that I have the intimate conviction that this is only a question of time, the way it looks. When I look at the zeitgeist in Francophone Africa, to me, it's game over. It's only a question of time until other sellouts are going to be overthrown. And as the Sir Okoli mentioned, the only countries that are still in ECOWAS are coastal countries. However, if only one coastal country joined the alliance, it is game over. Because
and
basically,
it's looking like it might be Guinea. Guinea has already stated that it's not going along with the ECOWAS sanctions, and it did that months ago. So to an extent, that country may already be here. Guinea hasn't formally left, and then you also have, as noted earlier,
and it is already suspended too. So basically, Guinea, as you said, is half in, half out. But I've heard even Nigerian and Ghanaian analysts talk about Togo or even Benin. But what I've been hearing constantly from many people who are officials, it is the fact that there are countries who are waving to come in already, 2 or 3. And these countries, the only country that still over there are coastal countries. And the point and the question is, sorry, it was a little bit long, but what do you think that the Anglophone country are going to do? Because what I can see in Ghana and in Nigeria, I don't see the same spirit, the same fighting spirit, and in the others. Sorry.
Briefly explain. You have to remember that the colonization in Nigeria was, and in many places, it was very light. It wasn't. So, for example, in the north,
absolutely,
in the Sokoto Caliphate, essentially made agreements with the British. And part of those agreements meant we're going to be in control of our people. You're not going to teach them English. You're not going to teach them Christianity. You're not going to teach them Western education, but we're not going to fight you. That was their colonization. But at the same time, their sultans and their emirs recognized the queen as being the highest monarch in the land. So northern Nigeria, and if you go to northern Nigeria today, you'll still have people that'll tell you "Batarinchi," meaning I don't speak English, and I'm insulted that you're in Hausaland asking me to speak English. You look at places like southeastern Nigeria. Some Igbo areas were only colonized for 20 years because they were fighting the British up until the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, and then Nigeria got independence in 1960. So you had people that may have only been colonized for 20 years. So if you look at Nigeria, and then the British didn't colonize. They weren't trying to indoctrinate the African's mentality to turn him into a Britishman. They were just there to do business, get their resources, and go. Colonization in France was a lot more weighty. They were trying to get into the psyche of the African and teach the African that you're an extension of France. You're an extension of the French Empire. And France controlled the economy and the politics, and some allege that they still control the economy and the politics of many former colonies up until today. And if you see some of the colonial agreements that were made during formal colonialism, they're still basically there during informal colonialism. So many French West, and you have to remember, sovereignty is twofold. You have political independence and economic independence. Economic independence means you have full and total control of the resources in the economy within the borders of your nation. Political independence means that you control the political process within the borders of your country, and that makes sovereignty. Many of the Francophone nations didn't really have political sovereignty per se, because if the leaders, for example, signed contracts that they weren't supposed to sign with other nations, allegedly, somehow, some way, they would end up out of power. So there was slight political independence, meaning that you're not going to have a Frenchman as your president. You'll have somebody from your country. However, they're going to be on a very tight leash, and then economic independence was totally just not there. So the colonialization pattern was very weighty and heavy. And so what we're seeing is a lot of French West Africans saying enough is enough. In the Anglophone nations, the biggest problem in the Anglophone nations isn't foreign exploitation at this point. The biggest problem in the Anglophone nations, former British colonies, is that there's systems of corruption that haven't been rooted out. And to be honest, many of us prefer those systems of corruption because we don't mind them. If we truly minded them, we would get rid of them. The fact that we keep them around is what we do is we keep them around and we hope to someday be in power to be in the position to take advantage of all these corrupt ways to enrich ourselves. That's the only thesis or hypothesis or theory as to why many of these Africans will see blatant corruption and not get rid of it, is because somewhere deep down inside we don't hate it. We think it's okay as long as we can ourselves exploit it. I think that's the major key. So the Anglophone nations, they're not necessarily being interfered with by foreign powers as much as the Francophone nations. So it's only natural that the Francophone nations are going to revolt in some sort of way to either get a fair deal or to stop dealing with the French altogether. The real question is, just like when I brought up historically in North Africa, when the Africans got rid of the Romans, because the Romans were committing all sorts of atrocities and were engaging in things that were morally not upright according to the African standards, look who came in after that. And look what happened after that when they partnered with the Arabs to get rid of the Romans. So the real question is, if and when they get rid of the French, what's going to come? Are they going to open the door for the Russians to come in and do even worse than what the French were doing? Because there are already reports of potential human rights violations by the Wagner Group, which is affiliated with Russia. And even though Burkina Faso is nationalizing a lot of and pushing for processing of the raw materials in-house before they're exported, you're also allowing Russians in as to bolster your defenses. But if you invite a snake into your house, it's still a snake.
Let me do this, Wilfred. If you have one more question, go ahead and answer it, and then ask it, and then I'm gonna pass it to Niger and Lou. So each person will get 2 questions.
I'm still going to think about a second question. I can let someone else talk for the moment.
Okay. To Niger. Go ahead, to Niger.
Thank you for having me, Diners, and greetings to Ebube for coming in and sharing information. And Wilfred, I hear you. We're going to talk about that later. Lou, greetings. And greetings to the ones on the chat and to the viewers. I don't even know where to start. I think it's been a while since I've been here, and all I've got to say is that the kind, you know what they call mumu in Nigeria. You know, it's a kind of stupidity. It's like our stupidity, is wearing a tight trouser. We refuse to take it off. And some of the things we've seen on the continent, I can't even for the life of me believe it. Because if you look at just before this Tinubu got into office, Nigeria was facing a period of where we are going to start having our refineries come on stream. We are having a lot of train lines being built in the country. And our exchange rate was not the best, but it was okay. We were managing. And this guy came in, and he's looking to destroy everything that has been built. The exchange rate Nigeria has lost more than 100% value within less than a year since he got into office. We've lost half of the landmass of ECOWAS. And he's gone. This guy is in France all the time. And he's in France right now as we speak. And he goes on. Last week or so, he was making a speech in Nigeria. He said, this jackpot syndrome. You know, Nigeria lost about 141,000 to the UK alone last year. People left Nigeria, 141,000 to the UK alone.
So, Nigel, let me ask you this: with a population of over 200 million, will that be considered a lot?
If it is the best minds, it's going to affect
it's more so the demographic. So
Yeah.
many of the people that left were in the middle class to upper class, and many of them were skilled professionals. The type of group that you actually need to retain to build a nation that's a developing nation, they simply left.
So, and it's not only the fact that they are leaving, it's the disruption it creates too within the economy. All those people that are leaving, they are leaving gaps that have to be filled by people that are not well qualified. In other words, you take your best, you go and train them, have them work for foreigners, because these people don't have any plan to bring them back. They have them work for foreigners, which is an exchange that we always lose in. And then Tinubu himself, this president, just last week or so, he was making a speech. He said that these people that are traveling overseas, it's not a problem, that they're going to train more. And that after they train more, if they need more supply people, that he will supply them more.
You sound like you don't believe him.
No, I believe him thoroughly. And what disturbs me about that, I've said this before, that the problem with our elites in Nigeria, in Africa, and many, especially in Nigeria, is when we were colonized and the Europeans left. You did say something about our colonization being of soft touch. I subscribe to the idea that these people have been groomed. They had 60 years or so to groom Nigerian leadership after the colonization wars. They groomed them in their own image and handed over power to them. These people are just continuing what the Europeans left. He doesn't see the value of his own people, just like slave traders did. He doesn't see the value of his own people. He would rather send them overseas. And the irony of it all is that if anybody knows about slavery in Nigeria, they know about Madam Tinubu.
Mm-hmm.
The irony of the name, Madam Tinubu was the slave trader that refused to stop selling slaves even when they abandoned it. Was the slave trader that said, instead of her to take a discount, she was willing to drown her slaves.
Well, let me ask you a question. Why did so many Nigerians vote for Tinubu in a very credible election if he's such a bad guy?
Because
we know where those votes came
this
from.
is the Mumu I started with.
You know what part of Nigeria those votes came from. I mean, come on.
I just told you that this is the Mumu thing we are in. We are in a Mumu dream where we sleep, we invite our enemies in and say they are friends. Even when all evidence points to the contrary, that we are poor and the so-called friend is living lavish. I sit here while I'm talking to you, Nigerians are, even Dangote Refinery is importing crude oil right now as we speak from America. From a country that has some of the best crude in the world. It's importing petrol. It says temporary. Let's hope it remains temporary. Because before you know it, it's going to last for 6 years.
Tunaja, you know what? I always love your analysis. I can listen to you for hours. I do have a question, though. You got to remember, everybody gets 2 questions. I'm not sure if you put yours forth.
Oh, pardon? You say what? I have a question?
Yeah, because I know you can be long-winded, and we don't want to be here.
I can be long-winded. I agree. But I want to, because I've not been here for a while. And if anything, if I'm not mistaken, Wilfred did speak for a bit too. So I just want to drill down then before I ask you the question that I've got for you. And I will ask my 2 questions. And so my point is that these people, what they are doing on the continent right now, they are not governing for us. They are governing for foreigners. And the police officers in Nigeria that are being trained, they say they are being trained by police officers or people from America. And they literally use the same name. I think the NDLA or some other kind of people in America that trained the Haitian police that led to the situation we have, Jovenel Moise being assassinated without one of his police officers having a scratch on them. That's why I started with our Mumu. And it leads to the question I wanted to ask. How do we change our elite class? Because our elite class, you have to convince them to even buy Nigerian-made cars. You have to convince them to. You're not even going to succeed convincing them to even buy our Nigerian-made cars, and you're not going to succeed convincing them to stop encouraging the use of dollars.
Hey, Nigel,
Well, let me-
Nigel, when I was in Nigeria last month, I saw a couple. Earlier this month, I saw a couple of those innocent G wagons.
Yeah,
You know,
those are kind of nice. Those innocent G wagons.
yeah, they're nice,
they're
but
right,
it's
they're
hard
right,
to
they're
force
right,
it.
yeah.
It's hard to force our elite class. That's in terms of the government to
So
encourage.
Niger, here's
use
the
of this
answer
card.
to that question, right? Here's the answer to the question, right? Do the people fear the elites, or do the elites fear the people?
I
That's the
think
real
they
equation.
both fear each other. That's the stupid thing.
What needs to happen is that the masses, if they're being done wrong, they need to put the fear into the elites who are doing wrong in order to force them to do right. See, the thing about life is this: nobody does what they're supposed to do unless they have to. The reason people wake up and go to a job that they hate, and they fight traffic, and they be around people that they really don't like, and they call it a career, is because they have to, and they know that they don't know any other way to get enough money to take care of their rent, their car note, their electricity, their clothing, and their entertainment without this job. They hate the job, but they have to go because they fear losing the job more than they fear being unhappy at the job. You see, fear is a powerful tool. And if used correctly, fear is exactly what's needed to make people act right. And until the people understand that the elites must fear displeasing the people, well, like Rotimi Amechi said, he said that the Nigerian elites steal because the people don't stone their cars, they cheer for them knowing what we've done. And I think he said we, which was interesting. I don't know if he's putting himself among those elites or among the elites committing malfeasance, but he said they don't stone us, they cheer us. So what's going to have to happen is the mentality is going to have to change, because at the end of the day, I'm a strong believer in you get what you deserve. You get the leaders that you deserve. Everything you get in life is what you deserve, because that means you're the most powerful person over your life. If you don't like what you're getting, that means you have the power to change it. It's called accountability. The masses in Nigeria that are being mistreated, they deserve that until they decide to put the fear of the masses into the elite, to the point where one of the elite wouldn't steal a kobo for fear of being exposed as a thief and knowing what could happen to him. In the marketplace, if you steal a handset, you may get a tire put around you, and the rest can just happen, if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, where does the diaspora come in? Because the people in Nigeria, you have to forgive them. The moment they have your phone number, they have where you live in Nigeria. The moment they have your phone number, they have where you live.
To Nigeria, it's not going to be the diaspora, because the diaspora, like I'm living in America, I visit Nigeria. Every time I visit, I love being there, because at the end of the day, I don't have to deal with a lot of the problems that happen to, as we call it, the common man. But the thing is this: until the common man gets upset, the common man's plight isn't going to change. That's the answer. It's not an easy answer, but it's a simple answer. And life, most answers in life that are functional and working, they're not easy, but they're simple.
Yeah, but from what I've seen historically, if you look at it, it depends on the country though. If you look at the case of the Soviet Union, when they changed, it was Lenin and the others, they were not home based. They were jailed a few times, then they left. And then they crafted their ideas and their ideology and everything. They came back and they turned the system around.
But
and
the Bolsheviks, are you talking about the Bolshevik revolution? Is that what you described? They were underground. They were still there. They were just underground. The leaders were in exile, but the movement was still on.
Exactly. That's my point. Because we don't see, if you look at what Nnamdi Kanu did, he did most of it from overseas. He didn't do most of it on the ground in Nigeria. And what I find is that the diaspora within the community is not necessarily engaging enough. And the greater diaspora is even less engaged, because clearly our leaders are very, very terrible people, and that they don't want to engage in. And now I understand it's deliberate. They basically don't want to engage that part for some reason, that maybe they are afraid of what the Europeans are going to do to them. I don't know, but they are not doing it, and their mindset is not even close to that. That tells you that the people that are aware of these things are the ones that are meant to do it. And let's say, like you are saying now, the people on the ground were supposed to do it. If you don't realize that you have a role to play in it, how are you supposed to fix the problem? You're just going to be blaming the people on the ground alone. You see what I mean?
Here's the thing. At the end of the day, whoever suffers most bears the responsibility to fix it. That's it. That's how life works. If you're suffering the most,
it's a selfish way of looking at it now, because
that's the realistic.
That are suffering.
Listen. That's the most realistic way to view it, right? So, for example, if I have a winter coat on, you have a winter coat on, and we all step outside, and the person without the winter coat is saying that they're cold, I mean, I understand that cold exists in this world, but I'm okay. And that's how the world works. It means you need to say, you know what? Nobody's going to come save me. I need to go get a coat. That's it.
But it doesn't bear with what the Lenin. When Lenin was overseas, he still cared about his people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I
So did
love
the
my
Jews.
people, and I'm not a communist.
And the second question is regarding what South Africa was able to accomplish, and it still goes. It's still linked to the first question. That if South Africa was able to exert so much independence and do what they are able to do, how is it that all the other African countries, as they are, have not even been able to do anything? And the South Africans don't even have a lot of diaspora. They are mostly at home there, and all they have is their ability to see the world for what it truly is. Because Mandela, they did fight the Europeans, and so did the Zimbabweans fight. We didn't fight. Like I said, they groomed our people, and you have to find a way to exercise this grooming that they put on our elites. And if the diaspora that sees clearly cannot do it, and the greater diaspora, like the African Americans now, that can see even clearer and not participating, you can see that we'll remain under the spell for a long time. Let me give you one example that I experienced. I was on a panel, or I just came on the panel where a European came on, was talking about this thing, working with, kind of dating a Sierra Leonean woman and stuff like that. And most of the Africans on the panel, the way they were talking to the guy, they were just kind of being polite and asking normal questions. But when Nakmizi came on there, you can see his way of looking at it was very different. He could pierce the point that the European was making and cutting the guy to pieces because he can see them for what they truly are. Our people can't. Even when I came on, I didn't see some of the things Nakmizi was able to pick up on. And it tells you that there is something to be said for the diaspora contributing to the awakening of the continent. If they don't, our elite is going to be asleep forever.
Well, like I said, I get it, but and to answer your second point, I believe that it starts with the masses.
Yeah, it's about how our people can.
Well, here's how it's going to happen. Here's how it's going to happen. Eventually, the straw is going to have to break the camel's back. Like Fela said, as long as we keep suffering and smiling, then nothing's going to change. It's when boys are no longer smiling that things will now begin to change. I'm sure you get it. But I believe it's Winifred. I believe you had one.
Yes, I got a second question actually.
Yes,
go ahead, Wilfred. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I was wondering what you think. How could I say it? Shit. I got a blank.
Just start talking about the topic that you were thinking of, and the question will come to you.
It was ECOWAS. Yes. Do you think ECOWAS is going to survive this? Very simple. Or do you think it's the end of ECOWAS, as I think it is?
Well, you have to look at ECOWAS has lost more members than it's gained in the last 12 years. You had Mauritania that left. Now you have all the Sahelian states that are leaving. ECOWAS was basically built for all the other member nations to be able to take advantage of Nigeria's large economy and Nigeria to be able to take advantage of geographical spread. So it was supposed to be mutually beneficial. However, Nigeria is supposed to be a $5 trillion economy right now. Nigeria is supposed to be where India is. Nigeria is supposed to be a top 5 economy. Nigeria has everything necessary to be a $5 trillion economy. Nigeria was a $600 billion economy up until the APC came into power. And of course, Buhari came. And now Bola Ahmed Tinubu is here. And things don't look, the trajectory doesn't look like it's changing. Let's hope it does, but of course nations aren't run on hope. Nations are run on reality, statistics, facts, and figures. So the facts and figures right now aren't showing that there's a potential change in the trajectory. If that continues to happen, well, then it's pointless to be in ECOWAS because the anchor economy, which was supposed to be Nigeria, which was supposed to be a 3.5 to a $5.2 trillion economy at this point, is barely a $500 million economy. So we're looking at it, and those nations might say, well, what's the benefit? So, for example, Benin Republic, there was an embargo. They were on Nigeria's side. They were blockading Niger Republic, if you will. They recently said, we're not going to do that. I mean, Niger Republic, they have money to be made. We have money to be made. Let's make this money. We don't really see a benefit in blocking these people. And part of it is that a lot of West African governments are looking at it in the spirit of Pan-Africanism and saying, well, if these people are truly fighting against European exploitation, why shouldn't we have their back? And if that becomes the real narrative, and if the coup plotters actually move into that ambit where they're generally viewed as imbibing the spirit of Pan-Africanism to lift up other Africans and lift up themselves in the process to their rightful place of where they were in the ancient world, well, then how can you knock them? If they do that through a military coup and then they bring in civilians and they put in whatever system that's fair and equitable, how can you be mad at them? So the real question in ECOWAS is, the benefit of being in ECOWAS is directly related to the economy of Nigeria, the leadership of Nigeria. So asking whether or not they're going to stay there, it's like, well,
there is a complication with that movement that the three nations are doing. From what I gather, it's Morocco that offered to grant them access to the sea. And but Morocco is not in good relations with Algeria next door, which is also a very, very strong military power that was supporting these three nations when Nigeria was training to invade them. Algeria offered to back them up. And now, because Morocco is a kind of forming some kind of alliance with these three nations, that is going to rub Morocco off the wrong way. And from the analyst, from the take of an analyst, he said the last thing these people need is to start a fight between their southern neighbors and their northern neighbors too. And especially given that Morocco is a very, very strong nation militarily. And that is another complication that we have to factor in, because it's like trouble is coming for us in West Africa, and we're just watching it happen. And none of our leaders are in position, and we are not prepared. We are simply unprepared for the dangers that we are facing now. Maybe it's a good thing that we experience the dangers and it actually happens. Maybe our eyes will open for once to the true world we live in, and when we start facing the consequences of all these errors and sleeping behavior that we've demonstrated for the last decades that we could have used to build, maybe we will actually fix the continent for once. Because look at what we are facing now. Either way, we are losing. Half of ECOWAS has been decimated. They are forming a kind of storm in the north there. There's another storm in the south. Nigeria is going all ballistic, crazy. It's like mess everywhere. And I really feel that if the diaspora stays quiet about this, they are not going to have a home to go back to. The storm that is forming there on the continent right now. I just thought I should add that.
You know what? On that note, we're going to go ahead and close out. So we want to note the importance that, Tunaja just stated that.
Hey, hold on. Let Lou call back in. Lou, we'll take your question, then we'll close out. If that's okay, Bube, just one more person.
Yeah, sure thing.
Lou, click on the link and come back in, because I know you were waiting.
Yeah, come on, Lou. Hopefully you can get in your question. There we go.
All right, Lou, go ahead and be yourself, Lou.
Hey, Lou.
Thank you.
If you can succinctly and quickly, we got about 3 more minutes. If you can succinctly and quickly ask your 2 questions, we'll get into it and then we'll close out.
All right. First of all, I want to say thank you to Dynas. I've been following you for a long time.
Appreciate you.
And yeah, I'm glad to be on here. I'm from Guinea, but part of my family is from Mali. So I've been following whatever is going. I consider myself to be.
What part of Mali?
Bamako.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm from Guinea though. But it's the same thing. They divided us anyway. Mm-hmm. But my question is, I'm a big fan of Asimu, and I've been following. I speak the language, and I've been following them for a long time. And I wanted to hear your take on what they're doing. Are you pessimistic about it or optimistic about it? That's one.
Okay.
And
for
2,
me, I'll answer your question. I'll answer your question one at a time. We just get straight to it. I describe myself as being extremely pragmatic. I have to see it to believe it, because that is what I should be believing. I should be believing what is actually on ground. So for me, what I see is that I see that there's potential. Now, I've seen potential and it go awry. I've seen people come in with popular support and then they become dictators, and they're worse than. You have to remember, when the Arabs were coming into North Africa, they were celebrated. By the time they finished with North Africa, the genocides and just all the atrocities that were committed, there's nobody that really celebrated them coming in. So the thing is, with them coming in, it's still too early, because they have to accomplish a body of work. It's like somebody coming in their first season in the NBA and you're saying they're the greatest ever. No, they need a body of work. And you judge their body of work. So what we have right now is we have people who are coming in and we still have to see their body of work. Now, do I have hope that these people could potentially be what they put themselves forward to be? Yes, I do. Do I have any proof? Well, they seem as if they're coming in to nationalize things for their people. But then in Nigeria, most of the resources are nationalized, and we see that the federal government steps in and snakes begin to eat millions and billions of naira. And we get stories like that. So the thing is, it's left to see. We have to see their body of work, and that's how you judge a person. You take people as they are. That just means that when they show up, you watch what they do. You don't worry about what they intended to do. You see what they actually did, and that's what you judge them on. Currently, they don't have enough work to truly be judged. We can just presume, and the presumption is in their favor because of how they're moving thus far, but we still have to give them at least a few years before we can actually say what they represent. What is your second question, briefly, before we close out?
I'm gonna have to join the chat earlier next time, but I joined late on this one. But second question is okay. Next time I get on early, I'll catch you guys early next time.
All right, cool.
But thank you for answering my question.
We've seen their handwork, though. You are saying that we have to give them a few.
Yeah.
We've seen all the policies they've done so far has made things worse.
Hey, Niger, come on, let Lou speak. Hey, Lou, you go ahead, get in your second question. We still got about a minute and a half left before we close out.
Yeah, and just to quickly respond to what you said, I agree with you with that. At the end of the day, we've seen a lot of people come and go, and there's a lot of frauds, right? And like there's 3 guys right now, or 4 guys that did a coup. So we have Niger, we have Burkina Faso, and we have Mali, right? Then we also got Guinea, where I'm from. But you already seen about the actions, who's who. We kind of get some sort of you could see who's who. Right now, it's only 3 of them. Initially, it was supposed to be Guinea, Burkina, and what's it called, and Mali. It was supposed to unite. You know, there's a reason why Guinea.
Still early. There's still talks with the Hellion Confederacy, so they still might.
Yeah, but there's a reason why the other 3 decided to go with it. Right? There's enough information on the ground already for. I agree with what you said. I agree with what you said. Now, my second question was Algeria, right? Algeria, and their role in this. How have you been observing their role in
here's
this?
The thing: there are 2 pipeline proposals for Nigerian gas to Europe. Europe is looking to cut out Russia, and Nigeria has a lot of gas, especially in the Imo State, places like River State, Anambra State, Delta State, Bayelsa State, and other places, I think Edo even. And Nigeria has a lot of gas. Wari's Delta State. Nigeria has a lot of gas, and that gas is looking to replace oil in the near future. And the Western powers are looking to cut out Russia out of the deal to further weaken Russia. You know, this is an ongoing war that they have between the West and Russia. Alexander Durgin wrote an amazing book, The Land Power and the Sea Power. He describes why geopolitically America and Russia will always be at loggerheads. But the thing is that Morocco wants the gas pipeline to run along the Atlantic so that it can benefit. Algeria wants the gas pipeline to run through Niger directly into Algeria and then into the Mediterranean so they can benefit from it. Morocco and Algeria dislike each other with a passion. They've been locked in their own skirmishes. They might even spill over to an actual war. So the thing is that we have to understand that, remember, Morocco attacked ancient Ghana and ancient Songhai and plundered both of them and helped bring the end to both those nations. Algeria, they were involved in certain things within the trans-Saharan trade. that we won't discuss here. But all of these nations are acting in their own self-interest. The nations in West Africa, further south into the Sahara, are just tangentially related in pawns. They're not the main actors in North Africa. So you don't want to get pulled into Morocco and Algeria's proxy war at any level. That's another thing that these Sahelian states would want to avoid. But with that, we're going to go ahead and close out.
Yes,
So if you haven't hit the like button, please go ahead and hit the like button. If you haven't shared, go ahead and share. Brother Dynasty has done a lot for us with this platform.
Thank you.
Get this type of dialogue just anywhere where people can come with thoughtful discussion on Africa. Thanks to Niger. Thanks to the other guys in the panel. I believe Winifred. Is it Willifred or Winifred?
Wilfred.
Winifred, our brother from the English-speaking part of Cameroon. And then Lou, our brother from Guinea/Mali/ ancient Songhai. Right. But thanks again for everybody for their time. If you haven't been to Up Close and Center, make sure you subscribe. If you haven't hit the like button, make sure you hit the like button here. Hey, Donis, let me give you back the mic.
Hey, I appreciate everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Shout out to Timbo Slimes for the $5 holla. Brothers, the Sahel states are going to be the epitome of a successful African state, and Russia is going to make sure of that. Hey, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Like, share, subscribe. Until next time, family, Donis Amir, search for Huru. Peace.